Hi, my name is Kathleen Wong, and this is my presentation on Dwayne Deaver. In this presentation, we'll be looking at two different murder cases, Michael Peterson versus North Carolina and Greg Taylor versus North Carolina. Dwayne Deaver was the main blood spatter analyst for the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, or the SBI. He played a crucial part in both Peterson and Taylor's homicide cases as he was the blood spatter expert witness for both. His testimony became the deciding factor that the jury focused on in determining the verdict for both cases. On December 9, 2001, Kathleen Peterson was found dead on the bottom of the staircase in her mansion located in Durham, North Carolina. The 911 call was made by her husband, Michael Peterson, stating that he had found Kathleen on the bottom of the stairs unresponsive. He had told the authorities that Kathleen was injured by falling down the stairs, but based on the autopsy reports, she had severe concussive injuries to the brain that would only be caused by blunt force traumas, and the injury found did not match up with the injuries caused by falling down the stairs. Rather, it was consistent with injuries that came from beatings. Michael Peterson was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. In 1991, the body of Shaquetta Thomas was found dead near a Nissan Pathfinder with stabbing and beating marks in Raleigh, North Carolina. With some research, the police found that the Nissan had belonged to Greg Taylor and arrested him the next day when he tried returning the car. He and his friend Johnny Beck were smoking in the car the night before and decided to drive on a small dirt road. Unfortunately, they got stuck and decided to walk to town to get help, only to find Thomas's body in the cul-de-sac. Despite finding the body, both Taylor and Beck had not reported it to the police. The prosecution had relied on Deaver's testimony, which was the final confirmatory evidence that had led to Taylor's verdict. Deaver claimed to have found blood in Taylor's car with chemical presumptive tests to prove the presence, which was the only evidence that had tied Taylor to the murder, but there was no DNA testing on the blood, which does not individualize that it was specifically Thomas's blood at the crime scene. Taylor was convicted of murder and had been sentenced to life in prison, while Beck's charges were dropped with the basis of little evidence. A few years later, after Peterson's conviction, Judge Orlando Hudson, the judge that had granted Peterson's retrial, had found from various different audits within the SBI that Deaver had been found giving materially misleading and deliberately false testimonies regarding bloodstain evidence in not just Peterson and Taylor's case, but numerous others. That had led Judge Hudson to believe that Deaver had bias in his testimony against Peterson during multiple trials. Judge Hudson also found that Peterson had withheld evidence regarding the presumptive test in Taylor's case. In Deaver's testimony in the retrial, he had claimed that there were additional tests that were conducted in the vehicle, but did not give the findings to the court in the original trial. The SBI's database also showed that the prosecution's basis of blood in the car was in fact not blood at all. Deaver had mentioned that the SBI had not sent the laboratory tests to the prosecutors or the defense. Withholding the blood test could have been crucial in exonerating both defendants during the official trial. Deaver's testimony in Taylor's case had shed light on the SBI's withholding of evidence and started audits for the institution's ethical works, which found misrepresented evidence in more than 200 criminal cases from 1987 through 2003, with Deaver's 34 criminal cases. Judge Hudson also found out that Deaver had faked his credentials and his professional experience. To start, Deaver's actual degree was under zoology and had only taken and completed 2 bloodstain analysis courses. Not only did he lack in the undergraduate degree in forensics, nor an emphasis on blood spatter analysis, he never had specialized training in that area, aside from his 2 courses. The SBI gets cases all over North Carolina. While Peterson's case was located in Durham, North Carolina, Taylor's case had occurred in Raleigh. In 1985, Dwayne Deaver had first hired in the SBI, but was later fired in 2011 after external audits and investigations. In 1991, Thomas was found dead in Taylor's Nissan Pathfinder, and by 1993, he was convicted guilty for the murder of Thomas's death. Then a few years later, in 2001, Kathleen Peterson was found dead, and by 2003, Michael Peterson's verdict came back as guilty for her murder. A few years later, Greg Taylor was pardoned, and a year later, Michael Peterson was released due to the Alford plea that had claimed that Peterson had done his time and became a free man, the same year in which Dwayne Deaver had been released from the SBI. Deaver was one of the most trusted blood spatter analysts at the SBI. His reports, his testimonies, and his credentials weren't ever questioned despite having falsified all three aspects. Because of his ranking in the agency, Deaver was able to commit multiple misconducts without being suspected. Not only did his status in his department allow him to proceed with this misconduct, the SBI had also allowed Deaver and many of his colleagues to break the laboratory's policies. Both cases relied heavily on Deaver's testimony and the biological evidence that was presented. While Deaver's actions may not have been acceptable, poor policies also influenced his behavior. It was also said that laboratory had told DNA analysts not to report a substance of an item as blood until they got a confirmatory test, which led to DNA analysts to bend the rules in order to please the prosecutors. Deaver was not the only one who had lied about his results in the testimony, since multiple scientists have cheated, twisted the truth, and in some cases ignored evidence that pointed to a defendant's innocence. One of the misconducts that Dwayne Deaver committed was his credentials. Deaver's degree was zoology. That itself already shows that he's not competent enough to be an expert witness in court to educate the jury. Deaver lacks an undergraduate degree in forensics, which makes him incompetent to work in the SBI as an analyst, let alone as an expert witness. He had also lied about his membership in any professional bloodstain analysis organization and had lied about the amount of reports that he had written and the amount of cases that he had worked on over the years. Both are very crucial when it comes to the competency of an expert witness's reputation, which Deaver had been missing. It's clear that Deaver was biased towards the prosecution all throughout his career, as seen in both Greg Taylor's and Michael Pearson's trials. When investigating the SBI's laboratory, Judge Hudson had come to believe that Deaver's actions were led to a common motive, motivational bias. Despite only having a small part of the cases, Deaver believed that someone had to be punished for the crime, even if it's not the defendant on trial. That also led him to withhold evidence from coming to light while testifying in order to sway the juror's verdict. Another ethical concern comes from evidence. In Greg Taylor's case, there was a presumptive test done for an unknown substance in Taylor's car. The presumptive test came back positive for blood. However, further testing in the laboratory, it was known that the suspected fluid was in fact not blood that was found in the car. Deaver's misconduct in the trial labeled him as accessory to the denial of defendants' rights and caused a mass audit in North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation that had not only replaced the crime laboratory director, but also 3 DNA analysts stepped down from the investigation. Just like Deaver, multiple scientists had also retained evidence that would have proven the innocence of defendants, which brings us to these questions. These are some questions that had arose throughout my investigation of Dwayne Deaver's career. Due to the environment he worked in, Deaver was also majorly influenced by his peers and his workplace that had pressured him to act unethically throughout his career. So the 2 questions I think are the most important would be, was there peer pressure that was the defining factor that resulted in Deaver's committing his misconduct actions? And was there fear of isolation or threats from his job position if he did not follow his coworkers or his supervisor's work ethics? Deaver is considered to be the agency's main blood spatter analyst, but did he actually get up through the ranks ethically as well? Was the State Bureau of Investigations already corrupted when they hired Deaver, which would have made it easier for Deaver to hide his zoology degree? Despite the fact that he was well respected, Deaver's actions eventually did not go unnoticed and in the end had costed him his entire career. And then here are my references.